Glad to see you here in person. Glad to see you on Zoom. Thanks everybody for being here. This week's Parsha is Toldot, and among other things, it really
13B.
Oh no, I always do that. Thank you for putting that up. Oh, by the way, on Zoom, the source sheet is on the website. I didn't send it in time for it to go out in the email, but if you check on the B'nai Yeshurun website, it should be there. I'm not sure exactly where. Probably if you click Learn and wherever the Torah Cafe information is, it should be there. Source sheet link there. So I want you to be able to follow along, but sorry, it won't be screen shared today. So in Toldot, we get Jacob and Esau, right? Two twins struggling from within Rebekah's womb. So I've titled our learning today Adversaries from the Womb, and I really want to explore the Jacob and Esau relationship. You may already be well aware of the implications and how the rabbis interpret throughout history that relationship as allegory. But I want to, that's the topic of our discussion today. So let's start. It's good to see everybody. Welcome. Let's begin with the biblical struggle between them. So who wants to go ahead and just share what we know from this week's Parsha, what we know from Torah, and beyond this week's Parsha about Jacob and Esau and their tenuous relationship?
For me, the name is very important meaning.
Good. Say why. The names are important. How come?
Jacob linguistically means the one who followed, because he was the second born of the twin.
Right. So Yaakov, the root ekev, two things. Heel, because it says that he grabbed onto Esau's heel as he was leaving the womb, just to show the sibling rivalry from the beginning of who wants to be first. Obviously, you want to be firstborn because that comes with special privileges and role in society at that time. There's the birthright, there's the blessing, there's inheritance, right? So you want to be firstborn. But Ekev, as Bijan says, also means following, just like we have the phrase coming at the heels of, right? So following. The rabbis interpret, and that's mostly what we're going to be, our sources today are how the rabbis vilify Esau. So the question is he really a villain? And if you look at our story, Ron is shaking his head vigorously, right? Ferociously, no. He doesn't really come off so villainous.
I mean, the worst thing that he did early in life anyway, was selling the birthright. But when you think about, depending on whose chronology you want to follow and how old he was at the time, I'm thinking that they were teenagers and that's all they were doing was being sibling rivalry, and it was no big deal.
Right. So
and immature sibling rivalry. And the only thing he really did that's in the Torah that was negative was marrying Canaanite women.
Right. Good. So pointing to two incidents. One is the famous bowl of lentils, right? The red stew.
Red stuff.
The red stuff. Give me some of that red stuff. So it says that Esau emerges from the womb ruddy. He's red. And that's going to be important. Hold on to that. And then flash forward to, they grow up and they differentiate, right? Esau is a man of the field, Sadeh. He's a hunter. And Jacob is a man of the tents. The rabbis imagine him as a good yeshiva boy, like a mama's boy, kind of, gentle. And it says he's smooth, so there's sort of this like hairy, that's also important. Hair is se'ar. That's going to come back in our conversation. But so hairy and red, Adom and se'ar, hang on to those words. Whereas Jacob is chalak, he's smooth, and he's more meager. Yes, go ahead.
That's interesting, because someone today, if you say someone is very smooth, that's a negative in describing a person.
Good. So that also is going to apply to Jacob.
But
yes,
hairy is macho, smooth is slick.
Yes, well, that is a good way to summarize their relationship, because so macho Esau and Jacob is more cunning. He is smooth. He is able to take the birthright and the blessing through cunning. So if you look at the Torah, so when we get in the Torah itself, you might see it as reverse. And this is where it gets a little bit, because Jacob's our guy, right? He is us. So we love him and he's the hero. But from the Torah itself, it seems that he's a bit cunning. He maybe mistreats Esau a bit. And yet, in our tradition, we understand that Esau's the villain and Jacob's the hero. So what I brought today is sort of how we get there, from what's in the text to where we land. Yeah.
I heard that, I read that, Jacob was conceived first, actually.
How do we know?
How do we know? Right, Larry says, I heard that Jacob was conceived first. I'm just going to comment on that and then I'll get to Bijan. But right, so the rabbis say, well, he was conceived first because this was their biology of twins. That whoever was born first must have been conceived second, because you're more back in the womb if you're conceived first. So Jacob was actually he wasn't the firstborn, but first conceived.
It can't go that way.
Right.
Not only that, but Yaakov was heel grabber.
Exactly.
He's trying to pull him back.
Right. Trying to get his firstborn.
So he
Yeah.
comes out second, but they're still twins.
Right.
So I mean, the whole idea of twins amplifies the situation as to primogeniture.
Yes.
Comes first.
Right.
Kind of. Okay, although Esau comes first,
Right.
I mean, there's really little difference. I mean,
Right.
It shows you the
Splitting hairs.
that it's not it should be about merit, not who comes first.
Yes. Good. Very good. Bijan had his hand, and then we'll go here. Yeah.
What is a good guess as to at what age was that birthright sold?
So it's a good question. Ron interprets it as them being teens.
Teen.
I would have to go in. The rabbis do the math, but they also say there's no beginning and no end. And
No,
First and last.
the rabbis say it was the Shiva meal for Abraham, and based on the ages, they would have been teenagers.
right, they say it was a Shiva meal because what are you supposed to
But
eat
you
at a
have to
Shiva?
assume it was the Shiva meal, though.
Round things. So eggs, but lentils are round, and so they say that
Leftovers from the Shiva meal.
they say right.
So already at that age, one get the other one to sell the most precious thing
Right,
that existed at that age
right,
and at that period
right,
for a bowl of soup.
right.
I wonder, what does it show us about what I call cerebral out
Uh-huh.
of one?
Good. So that goes back to the cunning and smooth thing. Bijan is saying that Jacob had more cerebral power, that he was more intelligent, that Esau is sort of this bronze, but no brains. And Jacob is the brains. He was able to get his birthright. But so going back for just a second, then I'll go Sheila, about what are the textual pieces of evidence to vilify Esau? The strongest case I think we can make, Ron pointed to two. One is that he despised his birthright, that he sold it for just a bowl of lentils. Now you could counter that and say, well, come on, he was desperate. It says he was at the point of death. He was so exhausted. By the way, even the rabbis note this in some of their interpretation, that he was out there active, doing stuff. Meanwhile, Jacob was more confined to the tent. He wasn't as active. And so, of course, Esau's going to be exhausted. He's out there working all day, busting his buns. And he comes back and he's hungry and to the point of death. That's the counter. But the rabbis certainly sees on what we're saying that, well, come on, for a bowl of soup, you really must not have cared about it too much in the first place. The second being his wives. It says that the Canaanite women that Esau married were a source of great tsuris, of great burden to his parents. So those are the two clear biblical demerits against Esau. But again, does this paint the picture of what we ultimately make of him as this really nefarious enemy? Sheila.
We always have the second one seems to be a hero.
Right.
Not the first one. I mean, even the story of Jacob, his sons, it's not the first one,
Right.
except for
It goes all the way back to
Benjamin
Cain and Abel.
and,
Goes back to Cain and Abel, the sibling, and then Ephraim and Manasseh too. Joseph switches his hands, and the younger is the one who gets blessed. So this is a recurring theme, absolutely.
this is a
Right.
recurring theme and, yeah, and as far as Esau working in the field, I think again, the rabbis have just said, anybody who works for a living
Right.
with his hands like
Right.
that is not as meritorious as someone who uses his brains. And that is, I guess.
Well, yeah,
that's why we're always so smart. We emphasize going to school and doing
Right. So I'll
intellectual.
push back just for a moment, which is that you're right to this extent that, yes, we certainly prioritize the Torah study, which is a very, intensive cerebral pursuit. But all of the rabbis had jobs, right? I think I told some of you that one of my rabbis in rabbinical school, when she'd invite us to her sukkah, she would always have a panel that listed all of the rabbis of the Mishnah and the Talmud, followed by what their job was. Blacksmith, a cobbler, just pushing back on the Haredi. We don't need to work because we're doing the real stuff. We're studying, and
And the
that's.
Haredim are actually fighting.
I know. This is something that, right.
Must have gotten the message.
I know Naftali Bennett mentioned that as well. David, I see your hand, David, on Zoom. Yeah.
So I think the other thing we could look at, if we want to leap a bunch further forward in history, is the relationship of Edom to Israel and Judah, which is a fraught one. And I think we even have a Haftarah, maybe it's this Haftarah, I didn't look in advance and I don't always remember. But Edom takes the side of Judah's enemies and gloats over the spoils at some point. And
Good.
the prophet anyway describes that as the how do you turn your back on your brother like that? You're going to reap the consequences. And then of course the rabbis build on that, this whole idea that various enemies culminating in Rome are somehow descendants of Esau.
Yeah, we are good. That's exactly where we're headed. So when you get the source sheet, we'll actually, I want to jump into our sources now. But I just want to let Nelson, you had your hand up, and then we're going to jump into our sources because David, that's where we're headed. Oh, you're muted, I think.
He always has to do it twice. I don't know why.
Okay, all right, we're going to jump into our first source. So
Can you
this
hear
is
me
what
now?
we. Oh, now I can hear you. There you go. You got
He
it.
always has to do it twice.
Yeah.
Guys have had terrible troubles this morning. I think there's a conflict between herders and hunters,
Yeah, good. Yes.
and it's not just these two brothers.
Right, Cain and Abel, right?
Well,
This one sacrifice of the field, of the produce, and the other of the cattle, and it was the cattle that was,
I mean, it still happened in this country between the sheep people and the cattle people.
right,
Yeah, the Oklahoma. I mean,
right.
It was the same
Exactly.
thing.
Go ahead, last comment, then we're gonna dive in.
Another twist to this.
Uh-huh.
I'm sure there aren't many people who would follow it, but I think Esau was very bright in that he knew that lentils were very nutritious.
Good.
Okay.
Right, he's out there hunting meat all day, and yet he wants the lentils, he wants the protein-packed legume.
He doesn't eat meat.
Yeah. Good, I wanna, we're on, just to keep an eye on time, let's jump into our first source. Forgive me, I often repurpose text studies, not text studies, but the format that I use to format the text studies. So this is not from the Talmud, the first one, this is from Toldot. I didn't change that, so apologies, but this is from this week's Parsha. Who would like to read? Go ahead, Larry, thanks.
But the children struggled in her womb, and she said, "If so, why do I exist?" She went to inquire of God.
Good. So this is a Rebecca, right? And Jacob, referring to Jacob and Esau struggling from the womb. And the word in Hebrew, Vayitrotzitzu. Does anybody see a word in there that they recognize?
Which word?
The first one, Vidrotzitzu. Rats, which means run. Good. And if you look at the last word, then she goes to Lidrosh et Hashem, which, she went to inquire of God. Drosh is
To get a story.
to get a story. Good. So now we're going to go into a drash, right? We're going to go into a midrash. This is from Genesis Rabbah.
I've always question what this is about going to inquire of God. I mean, in those days, everybody just talked to God directly.
I know, it's amazing.
So who was she going to inquire from?
Yeah,
Who was there to
An
inquire from?
intermediary. It's just like today, why
But
can't
there
we
weren't
go-
any back then.
Right.
But why
Who
can't
was
we
there?
go pray for ourselves? We still.
But there was nobody else there.
The Misha Bar, the rabbis got to repeat the name.
Right.
'Cause, I mean, we're not capable of it.
right. Well, there is a rabbinic understanding that God was more accessible in that way back then, that there's a point where after the prophets where God sort of becomes less accessible.
Yeah,
So,
but I'm saying there was nobody else. There was her. There was she and there was her husband, and that was it.
right.
Well, Abraham was still alive at the time.
Yeah, but so I interpret this just to mean prayer, because the next one is then God answered her, saying 2 nations are in your womb. So I just think she went to go pray to God amidst her distress. We get this Hannah too, although one has children in her womb, the other definitely wants that. Okay, now let's dive into the midrash here. They are seizing on the word v'yidrotzitzu, and that midrashic connection between running, that they were struggling, but maybe also they were trying to run. Who would like to read the midrash in the English? Go ahead, please, Lois. Thanks.
Rabbi Barecha in the name of Rabbi Levi, so that you will not say that it was after he, Esau, emerged from his mother's womb that he confronted him, but rather while he was still in his mother's womb. His fist, Zirte, was outstretched toward him. That is what is written. The wicked are corrupt, Zoru, from the womb.
Great. So I'm going to pause real quick. There's another midrashic connection between similar words here for fist and here for corrupt. That we are making. Remember, this is about the vilification of Esau. Now we're moving beyond what's just in our Torah to what is the rabbinic evidence they're bringing to vilify Esau. One being that we know there's a verse from Psalms that the wicked are corrupt from the womb, but how they're connecting that to Esau is through the Zoru Zitre connection. Zirte, Zoru connection. That Esau's fist extended, that they were wrestling in the womb, so he must have been corrupt from the womb. Yes, go ahead.
Okay, your last comment that they were wicked from the womb,
Mhm.
but isn't Judaism precisely say that we have a chance to redeem ourselves?
Yes, right, so that,
Then
yes,
that they shouldn't be saying that if they
good.
saying that, hey, we can change.
Exactly, right. So there is something fundamentally, it strikes us as un-Jewish about this, which is that this sort of predestination that you are destined to be a certain way from the womb,
Yeah.
right? But hold that up to Jeremiah, which I think is also in this midrash that so we'll get to it. But before I formed you in the belly, I knew you. God speaking to Jeremiah. Now, the way that the shot of that, the simple meaning of that is God speaking to Jeremiah, saying that I have called you, destined you, not all of human beings from the womb, you, Jeremiah, from the womb to be a prophet. Before you were formed, I knew you. This actually in Christian, and we're going into Christianity soon, but they use that often as a case against abortion to say that, look, we have in Jeremiah that you are a fully fledged human being from the womb. God knew Jeremiah from the womb, but it's not as much the Jewish interpretation of that verse. But there is this tension in our text between somebody being predestined, like Jeremiah, to be a prophet from the womb, versus no, we are never doomed from the start. We always have a choice. We have free will. We have tshuva, right? We can always change. We're never set in our ways. And yet, the rabbis here are really going out of their way to make the case that Esau was wicked from the start.
Most babies in the womb have their fists clenched.
Yes,
Well, there's nature.
that's
there's
right.
nurture.
There's a beautiful, yes, when I did a chaplaincy, there was one of my supervisors, a rabbi in LA, had a beautiful little drash of consolation for around death, which is that because there's a tradition that you're supposed to open up the palms when somebody dies as a letting go of life for what's next, but also that process of letting go, which is so terribly hard for us to do. There's holding on and there's letting go in the face of death. But she says, as a baby, you come into the world with clenched fists. This is from Talmud. She's pointing this from Talmud, that the rabbis say that as a baby, you come into the world with clenched fists, ready to take on the world and to receive. But when you leave it, you leave with fists open. But yeah, so that's right. Biologically, it's correct that the babies often do have, but in this case, they are interpreting that as adversarial. But it's sad. There's a sadness here. And if you feel for Esau a bit. Okay, let's keep reading. So the wicked are corrupt from the womb. Lois, if you'd continue.
The children were agitated within her. When she would stand adjacent to synagogues and study halls, Jacob would convulse to emerge. That is what is written. Before I formed you in the belly, I knew you. When she would pass houses of idol worship, Esau would run and convulse to emerge. That is what is written. The wicked are corrupt from the womb.
Good. So where are they running? Jacob is trying to run out of the womb to go to the Beit Midrash, to study. And Esau is trying to run out of the room to go worship idols.
A little far.
How would you know which one is which?
Okay,
Right.
so
Right.
They didn't look alike.
They move around.
Exactly.
I really think that there are
We know.
biological differences between two children of the same couple.
Mhm.
We all see that even to this day.
Mhm.
The family has 2 or 3 kids. One of them is so radically different than the other one.
Yeah,
That is the nature of the nature.
right.
That's the nature of biology.
Yeah.
When something divides, you don't get to 100% equal half.
Right.
There are some differences,
Good.
and they are 115% random.
Yeah.
There is no rhyme or reason.
Right. So maybe we're defending the rabbis a little bit to say, look, maybe it's a little far-fetched to say that one was an idolater from birth and from the womb, and one was a good Jewish boy from the womb. But what the rabbis are trying to say here is that they were different, and that is consistent with our understanding
So
of.
it just happens that Jacob had more cerebral power and Esau had less.
Sure, well,
That's what there is to it.
that's certainly where the rabbis going. That's certainly where the rabbis.
And it continued through generation. Look at what a few hundred millions of that population compared to us, 15 million. I mean, isn't that obvious?
Well, so I would push back against that, and everyone is entitled to their own opinion. But I would say that I would resist the temptation to put a Jews are clearly smart, and you could point to all the Nobel Prize. We are very impressive people, and I love our people. But I would resist the urge to denigrate in terms of intellectual prowess.
What period does this Genesis Rabbah interpretation come from? We talk about.
Sure. So I believe that the scholars point to 2nd century. So Common Era. CE.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is Second Temple literature.
Because it seems so silly. It really does.
So that's the question. Why are they doing it? Why are they doing it? And they're doing it because there seems to be a real discomfort with Esau. And as we'll see, as David points to Malachi, which is the Haftorah, the prophet who says that God despises Esau.
Yeah,
So we have in the Torah, and so I think the rabbis are trying to make sense of this. Why is he here? And so they're making a case, whether it's particularly compelling or not. We want to understand why they're doing it. Sheila, and
They
then
are constantly making a case.
Yep.
Again, in other words, when there are 2 children or more, they have to justify why one of them is going to be the leader. It doesn't
Right.
matter how many kids there are.
Right.
Why'd you pick him?
Right. We are.
And we are making a point that we are not doing it based on who was born first.
Right.
Even if like in the case of Jacob's children,
Yes.
they were all legitimately, well, some of them were legitimate.
Yes, and look, we come from Jacob, so I think there's also the rabbis want to make it clear that Jacob didn't just swindle his brother who truly deserved it. I think the rabbis are needing to build the case for Jacob, and part of that strategy is proving that Esau is a Rasha.
There's plenty of evidence in the text itself, in the Torah, to point, to say that Esau is the wrong person.
Mhm.
He's not the next link in the chain.
Yeah.
That it's Jacob, and
Right.
Jacob isn't perfect, but you don't have to demonize.
Yes, good.
the womb
Right.
in order to make that case.
Good. I think that's
It's
yes.
Right.
ridiculous.
Right. So that is one of the enduring points I want to arrive at today, which is, can we tell our own story and boost up our own without resorting to that tactic, when particularly when it seems unfair?
I mean, the other thing, just biologically or anatomically, as Sheila was saying, babies move around in the womb. So how do they know which one was convulsing for which?
Exactly.
And, they're moving around
Right.
during the pregnancy.
Right. Good. I want to move on to our next text. So this one is also from Genesis Rabbah, in this midrashic work. We're on page 2 in the English. Will somebody read?
Esau came from the field.
Good. So this is the incident right before the lentils, right? This is the lentils. Go
We
ahead.
find that Abraham lived 175 years and Isaac 180. Those 5 years that the Holy Land, Holy Blessed One withheld from his life, it is because Esau violated 2 transgressions. He consorted with a betrothed young woman, as it is stated, for he found her in the field.
Let's pause. What's the midrashic move that's made there? They're saying that, first of all, what is the question they're asking? From the verse, Esau came from the field and he was weary. He was exhausted. He was tired. So what are they trying to?
Weary.
Yeah, why is he weary? Why did he come in? Sorry? Because he was out doing something he shouldn't have done, right? And they're saying that it was that he lay with a betrothed woman in the field. So how did they get there? What's their proof that he did that? That seems random. You don't know what he did. What's their midrashic connection? They're connecting 2 words.
He was tired. I mean, I don't know.
The tired is what that's actually the next one they're going to do. Weary. This one is field. Good. Yes, Chad, field. It says that Esau came in from Sadeh, from the field. And if you look at Deuteronomy, it's talking about laws against when this is sensitive, so I apologize for bringing it up. But if a woman is sexually assaulted, right? So if it happens in the field, there's no question that it was no consent there, because she would have cried out but couldn't be heard as a person in the city. Anyway, it's a longer conversation, but so that is the connection. They're saying field. He came in from the field. That's referring to the Rotzeach, the person who assaults a woman in the field. Okay, so that's why they're saying, so clearly he was coming in from having done that terrible thing. Okay, keep going. Yeah, it's all a stretch is the point. Yes, but keep going. Yeah.
Wait.
Oh, go ahead.
I
Question.
just read it, but Abraham lived 175 years and Isaac 180 years.
Right.
What is this?
The point about that is that it says that he would live to a good old age.
But he would live to a good old age.
In this case, well, Abraham, yes, Seva Tova, that he would good gray hair, a good old age. But the question is, so Abraham lived 175 years, but Isaac outlived him. And if Abraham was promised to live to a ripe old age, why did Isaac outlive him? Ripe old age would have been at least 180, right? So the rabbis say, well, that was the promise, but God actually, in an act of mercy, took Abraham 5 years early so that Abraham would not live to see the monster that Esau would become. And that's where Ron gets the consolation fee, that the lentils were really the Shiva food, because Abraham had already died, because now Esau has clearly already become this monster. He's coming in.
Have this from the Midrash and not from the Bible.
This is all from Midrash, not from the Torah, yeah.
So then you don't really have to accept that.
Now we have the raison d'etre of the class, of the Midrash class, the lunch one. Okay, let's keep going. And he was weary.
And he was weary. He killed a person, just as it says, for my soul is wearied by the killer.
Good. So what's the Midrashic link here now? What are the words? Weary, right? So it says that he was weary. And if you look at Jeremiah, it says, my soul is wearied by the killers. So where is he coming in from all tired? He just killed somebody because he was weary.
That's also not in the Torah.
Not in the Torah. No, none of this is in the Torah. This is Midrashic interpretation. Okay, keep going.
If thieves came for you, if plunderers of...
Oh, sorry. I think we skipped. So it says, Rabbi said.
Right, he stole as well, just as it is said, as it says, if thieves come for you, if plunderers of the night, Obadiah, the holy blessed one said, this is what I promised to Abraham and said to him, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried at a good old age. Is this a good old age that he sees his grandson engaging in idol worship, engaging in forbidden sexual relations and shedding blood? It is preferable that he leave the world without seeing it. That is what is written. For your kindness is better than life.
Pretty dark. So the psalm there is saying, for your kindness is better than life, saying that God was showing Abraham kindness, which is better than living that extra 5 years and seeing what Esau would become. Okay, so I think we're now seeing how the rabbis are vilifying Esau, and we're noting that it seems a bit a stretch. It doesn't necessarily seem so warranted and fair just based on the shot of the text of Torah, but we can also understand why they're doing it. It is to continue to elevate Jacob as the rightful inheritor and Esau as, I mean, clearly, and it says later, we're going to get to later in Malachi, which is 2 texts from now, that God despises or Sinah hates or rejects Esau. So the rabbis aren't just doing this out of indiscriminate, hatred. They have to reconcile the fact that Jacob is the chosen, inheritor of the Jewish tradition and of our hero, and Esau is not. So they have
It's
to
going to extreme here that he killed somebody.
Yeah.
Well, it's just not persuasive. And
No,
what
it's
it
not.
does is it reduces the credibility of these sources.
Right.
I think.
Yes.
It's.
No, but the question is, what is his intent, right? If the rabbis genuinely felt like this was held up in the court of law, that would be something. I don't actually necessarily think they do. I think they understand. Rabbinic literature often goes to the extremes to prove points, but it's not necessarily to believe the literal nature of those extremes. So I have nothing but I'm a rabbi in this tradition. I love this tradition. I carry forward this tradition. So I don't think that they're deluding themselves into actually believing, but I do think they believe the truth behind what they're saying, which is that they did consider Esau to be a rasha, a wicked one. Do they actually believe that he came in from killing or from sexually assaulting or from, I don't know. But I do think that they are using midrashic techniques that are legitimate. These are the rules of the game. You can make these claims if you're able to back it up with Torah evidence, even if it seems tenuous, but creative. I would use the word creative. Go ahead.
But in the Hebrew, it says lebushav adumim. Adumim is the midam.
Right, exactly, good.
So maybe he did something.
Good, so that's another, right? So Esau becomes, Edom is a people that live southeast of Judah, and Esau gets linked to Edom. For one thing, he goes to settle in the hill country of Seir. And again, there are all these word plays that happen, right? Remember I said to hold on to one of the words that Esau is hairy, Seir. There's a word play with Seir. So he's linked to this Seir, and Edom, remember, sounds like, so the Edomites, Edom, sounds like what Hebrew word? Adom, right, Adam, which is human, but we're going to go with the other one, which is Adom, which is red. It says he came forth red and ruddy. And so what Helena is saying that there's Edom, right? Also, there's the word dam, which is blood. Blood is red, Adom. So there are all these links to make with Esau and bloodshed, and he's also a hunter. I mean, he would have been, pretty bloodstained. Yes.
It's not just the rabbis. It does state in the Torah that Rebecca had a prophecy, and that she would have 2 children, and one was destined to be the leader, descendant of Abraham, or something to that effect.
The elder will serve the younger, right? It's right after the first verse that we have that she went to Lidrosh at Hashem. She went to inquire of God. God answers what Larry's saying now, that God says 2 nations are in your belly and they're struggling inside of you, and the elder will serve the younger. So Rebecca knows.
So my point is that if you believe that our matriarch, the prophecies they have are true, if you believe that, then it's not just the rabbis that are saying that, interpret that. So
Isaac had a certain blindness, right? It literally, it says that his eyes faded, but also it says that Rebecca favored Jacob, and it doesn't give a reason. It just says that Rebecca, but maybe it's because of this. And it says that Isaac favored Esau because his game was in his mouth, because he liked the venison that Esau would hunt and make for him. So the rabbis say this is a lesson on unconditional love, because Rebecca loved Jacob. You don't need a reason, right? You just know. But Isaac's love of Esau was conditional. He loved that and that was doomed to fade, because any conditional love doesn't last.
Right. So what this does is, by demonizing Esau, you're casting aspersions on Isaac. Not necessarily aspersions, but you're amplifying his weakness.
Yes, which is okay though. Which is okay, because all of our heroes are flawed. And our tradition goes out of the way to say that. What yet another way that Christianity and Judaism, in terms of
but this critical juncture, where you have Isaac is the first son of the covenant to be born, and it's critical that he makes the right choices, that he puts himself in line with the covenant to carry it on.
Right.
And it's only because of Rebecca.
Right.
I mean, Rebecca is the hero. There's no question. She leads Isaac to Jacob.
Right.
And Jacob to Isaac.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Good. Okay, I want us to keep going. So just one more key text for this vilification of Esau, because remember, so when Jacob does 2 things. One, he sells the lentils. He gets the way better end of the deal there. He gets the birthright for a bowl of lentils. That's number 1. Number 2 is he gets the blessing. At the end, when they're a bit older, and Isaac is going to die, and Isaac wants to impart a blessing, and it goes to the firstborn. But Rebecca dresses Jacob, because Isaac is his sight is faded. So Rebecca dresses Jacob up like Esau, putting on the skin so that he smells and feels hairy and looks, smells of the field. And Rebecca makes venison. So Jacob now presents the venison looking like Esau. Isaac says, "Come here." The voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau, and gives Jacob the blessing that he meant to give to Esau. When Esau comes in right after this and understands that what's happened, he cries out and says, "Father, do you only have one blessing? Do you not have a blessing also for me?" And it's really heartbreaking. You wonder, was there not room in Isaac's heart for another blessing? But the nature of the blessing was sort of at the expense of the other, right? It was very much, you're like the elder will serve the younger kind of thing. So he gives him a blessing. But I was at a Shabbat dinner last night, and there was a student at Schechter learning the Parsha, and the way that he was summarizing it was very precious. He said, and then Isaac gave Esau a blessing too, but that blessing stinks. But then Esau, then we see this villain come out of him, where he says, "Let the mourning period of my father be at hand, and I will kill my brother Jacob." Right? He is now to the point of vengeful murder. Flash forward to this, Jacob runs away. He meets Leah, he meets Rachel, he amasses this family, and Esau comes to get him. His army is approaching, and you're geared up for war. There's 400 men with him. This is looking bad. But then when they finally, Jacob tries sending gifts, and let me try to appease him. But when they meet, you think, oh, this is going to be bad. and Esau and Jacob weep and reconcile. And it's a moment of, oh my God, maybe there can be peace between these brothers.
And Esau and Isaac both come to the funeral of Abraham.
Right, and they come to bury their father, just like Ishmael and Isaac
Ishmael.
bury Abraham, right? So there are these rivalries that are put aside to bury their parents. But it says they weep on each other's necks. What are the rabbis going to do with this? Let's see. Let's jump in. Right? It seems so clearly generous and compassionate. Let's see where the rabbis go with it. This is again from Midrash Rabbah. Who wants to read in the English? This is second on the second page. Any takers?
Right.
Okay, Jackie, thank you. Esau ran to greet him.
Esau ran to greet him. He embraced Jacob and falling on his neck, he kissed him, wept. The word kiss is dotted above each letter in the Torah.
Well, Jackie, you would be aware of this, knowing that you're a scribe and you were so the word for he kissed him, vayishakehu, in the Torah, you would see if you looked at it, if you looked it up, you'll see a bunch of dots above it.
It's done in later on.
Right, the Masoretes do this later, right? But the rabbis are commenting on why are there all these weird dots above that word?
It's a paragraph break, or it's an ellipse. And it means something critical. It means something that's terrible.
Right, so good.
There has to be a space. You have to take a pause.
Sure.
And think about this because it's pivotal.
Yeah, so let's see how they interpret it. So Jackie, keep reading.
Rabbi Simeon ben Elazar said, it teaches that Esau felt compassion in that moment and kissed Jacob with all his heart. Rabbi Yanai said to him, if so, why is kiss dotted? On the contrary, it teaches that Esau came not to kiss Jacob, but to bite him. And said through Jacob's neck became like marble, and that wicked man's teeth were blunted. Hence, and they Jacob wept because of his neck, and Esau wept because of his teeth.
It's really far-fetched.
It's far-fetched. And again, I think that supports the idea that I don't think the rabbis actually believe that his neck became like marble. But I think they do believe that this couldn't have been as peaceful as it looked, because again, they are upholding that Esau is truly a rasha and would not have had the generosity to forgive. Which is, again, it's this interesting thing of we can understand why the rabbis are doing it, but it doesn't mean we ourselves today need to uphold that Esau is truly a rasha. And that's maybe we do. And I'm saying there's room for both. You can absolutely believe that he is, but you can also say, well, our tradition seems to, and I understand why it's doing it, but do we need to, when we read Esau today, do we need to read it in the same light? But we're not done with this. There's more text. Yeah.
The more you demonize Esau, the easier it is to accept Jacob's.
Exactly right. So that's the strategy they're using. But do you need to denigrate one in order to embrace the other, or even elevate the other?
And in our tradition, God says, do not make war on Adam. You know, when the Israelites are coming through and the end they're trying to find a path.
Right. Good. This is one of the texts. You're jumping the gun.
Do not hate an Egyptian in your heart, and do not basically denigrate Adam or make war on Adam.
This is one of the texts. So
that overrides everything else.
Good, but let's talk about what it's overriding. So let's Malachi, or maybe not overriding, but somehow being consistent.
He's telling us he was born of Rebecca.
Right.
And on Isaac.
Right.
You know, and
but here's
to demonize him, you know, it's unfair.
Right, because he is still our brother, right? From the womb, right? We shared a womb. Yes.
What about the whole thing of forgiveness, that Esau was asking in a sense for forgiveness and Jacob was accepting that, and he was also, and that so.
Or that Jacob was asking for forgiveness.
Right, they both were asking for both of them, and they were sort of finally together, and then to demonize that and say, well, he was.
Right, it undermines
Right,
tshuva, right, it
Right,
undermines.
you know, and
tshuva.
isn't God, you know, if God can forgive him, you know.
Right.
so-
Absolutely, right? That's why it's this thing that seems, it doesn't seem what our Jewish values would inform. And that's where there's an interesting tension. Okay, so Malachi, who wants to read this, is from one of the last of the prophets, actually the last. If you go to page 3, you could read in English. This is from the Haftorah that David was mentioning. Go for it, Larry, thanks.
I have rejected Esau. I have made his hills a desolation, his territory a home for beasts of the desert.
Right, so there is unequivocally a hatred for Esau here, or a rejection. The Hebrew here is
Sinat.
right, it's saneti, right? So which is hate, but here it's translating it as reject, which I think is more helpful.
Very nice.
Because but we're about to get this from Deuteronomy, our penultimate text here says, you shall not abhor an Edomite, right? For such is your kin. You shall not abhor an Egyptian, for you were a stranger in that land. So in that way, reject is a little more helpful because, or it's the other way you would say it is, okay, well, God can hate Esau, but still we are commanded not to. So you could use reject or you could use hate, but either way, that doesn't give us license to hate. In fact, our Torah says that we must not abhor the Edomite. But we jumped ahead a little bit. So go ahead, Ron.
Well, the abhor is a different verb than the sinat.
Interesting.
And I'm surprised that the guy would do the sinat, since that was the reason given by the rabbis again for the destruction of the second temple.
Yeah, right. Sinat Pinam, baseless hatred. Oh, it's interesting. There's a rabbi who said that, and this is not one of the rabbis of our Talmud admission. This is a Hasidic rabbi let me see, the late 1800s. And he was saying that there are some things that God, like the real dirty work that God doesn't want us to do, God does because only God should and not us. And he refers to the slaying of the firstborn, that it happens at the darkest part of night, right? And God says, don't leave your homes. So God's saying, like, at some point, right, our plight is so terrible that God needs to step in, but doesn't want us to see it or learn that kind of violence. So that the trouble with that is it imagines this violent God, but at the same hand, has us in relationship with a God that doesn't want us to learn that violence. So that's this particular rabbi, Shmuel Tamaris, Aaron Shmuel Tamaris, who's, a radical thinker. But anyway, I want to go back for a second. So, okay, now we're getting this hatred that even if we think that the rabbis have made this far-fetched, we have to reconcile it with the fact that our tradition still does have this, paints Esau in a villainous for other legitimate reasons. What are those more legitimate reasons? And now we're going to get to what David said earlier. So I want to make this link between Esau. We've already made the connection between Esau and Edom. Edom is this province that's southeast of Judah, and then Rome, and then Christianity. So what happens is in the 2nd century BCE, right? Taking a step back, like 586 BCE, right? When the first temple is destroyed, this Edomite people that were at times vassals to Judah, which again kind of fulfills that prophecy of the younger will serve the older, right? That there was this subservience, that they were actually under Judah's control in a sense. But then in the blessing, in that stinky blessing that Isaac gives to Esau, at one point he says, but you will break that yoke of his control. Mm-hmm. And that kind of happens because they join with, they cheer the Babylonians on as Judah's as the temple's being destroyed. And that's where we get this psalm, which is, I think, written in maybe the 4th century, but looking back at that moment of the destruction of. So does somebody want to read this one? Psalm 127.
remember, O Lord, against the Edomites, the day of Jerusalem's fall, how they cried, strip her to her very foundation.
Right, this is the psalm that begins by the rivers of Babylon. There we sat and wept as we remembered Zion. And if I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my hand forget its skill. So here there is this link between Esau and Edom as joining with the enemies in Babylon when it was destroyed. But then when we came back, 50 years later, and we started to rebuild. Again, we sort of reasserted that power, but Edom had gained a little more power because they had come in. But then when Rome comes, there is a connection made between Herod and Edom, that King Herod, who is the child of converted Jews, of converts, but is from Edom. And Herod, the rabbis despise. He was a very cruel king. He murdered his wife and her whole family, and he was a brutal king. But he has this connection, right? But so that makes the connection between Esau, Edom, and Rome, and then it goes into Christianity when Constantine converts to Christianity. So now Rome becomes Christian, and Esau is now connected with Christianity, and all of the violence between Jews and Christians to Jews that happened with the Second Temple and destruction and conversions, and so that is now how Esau becomes Christianity, and there's this polemical interpretation now of Jacob and Esau, symbolizing this struggle between Christians and Jews. Any question? I know that's a lot, but does that make sense? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this, concept of, as Ron said before, a sibling rivalry that we see throughout Genesis and the other texts too, is ubiquitous.
Yes.
And it's not good. In other words, it's so common, but we need to figure out how to reconcile with our siblings.
Exactly.
Our own siblings, in addition to, because we had, Ishmael and Isaac,
right?
The rivalry, and now we have Islam,
right?
Then we had Adam,
right?
Christianity. Now we have Islam at our throats,
right? So sibling rivalry it permeates all of these stories. But here's what's interesting. So I had a history teacher in rabbinical school who said that you may see the relationship between Judaism and Christianity as one as sort of mother-daughter, or one comes from the other. And he said that's valid, but I want to challenge you to see it as, first of all, Judaism temple Judaism, right? But then rabbinic Judaism and Christianity being more like twin siblings emerging from the ashes of the Second Temple. And if you look at it that way, once again, we have this now sibling rivalry, not parent-child. And part of sibling rivalry is differentiation. So a lot of the animus comes from, I am not you. And so I have to separate and denigrate to show the ways in which we're different and forget the shared womb. Right. So that's sort of how he contextualizes a lot of the oppression of Jews from Christians as being it's because we actually have so much in common, and because we're actually emerging together from the ashes of the Second Temple.
He's trying to make it a nicer explanation of anti-Semitism
No, I don't think it makes it nicer. I think he's giving a helpful framing as to why it was so ferocious, that it was this, not like parent-child, but siblings needing to differentiate and say, I am not you, and you are wrong, and I am right. And we are actually we have the birthright, right? Christians are actually the fulfillment of the Old Testament. The birthright belongs to us. We are Jacob, you are Esau.
Well, that's what the Muslims say, that Ishmael was the one who was.
Right, it's what everybody says, right? But we said, well, no, Christians, you're Esau, we're Jacob. right? So there is all this polemics that go through how you're interpreting who is Jacob, who is Esau, but you can see the shared womb for all of it. And that is where I'm wanting to land the plane in just a moment, but I see Nelson's hand.
I'm sorry, but earlier, I mean, this is a better account, I think, but because earlier you thought of the second temple as being done, destruction was Christian, but they didn't exist then.
Right.
Or it was Roman.
Right, no, more pagan Rome, yes. But then when Constantine converts to Christianity, Esau, which was connected to, so it goes Esau, Edom, Rome, Christianity. When Rome becomes Christian.
That's several centuries later.
Yes. But I'm just tracing the through line of how we get there. Yes. Okay, but so I want to go back to the point that you made. So now we can understand where the vilification comes from, where it was far-fetched on one, but then where it also becomes, well, I can see where actually, if you're understanding them to be Rome, if you're understanding them to be Christianity, then I can see how Esau actually is a legitimate enemy and rival, given the history. But then we go back to, so are we supposed to hate this enemy? And we have in Deuteronomy, you shall not abhor an Edomite, for such is your kin. You shall not abhor an Egyptian. You are a stranger in that land. That's not to say, well, so should we just forgive all of the oppression and the pogroms and the right? No, I'm not going that far. Although forgiveness is a great thing, but I'm not saying that we. But there's a difference between understanding how one becomes perceived of as an enemy versus I must therefore carry on this hatred in my heart moving forward. And I think it's a very fine distinction, but our tradition comes to say, you shall not hate. And then I want to end with the Kotzker Rebbe, again, a Hasidic rabbi, more contemporary, I think the 1800s, right? Maybe 1900s. I should know, I don't at this moment. But does somebody want to read?
It's not 1900s.
1800s. Does somebody want to read what the Kotzker Rebbe has to say? Go for it, thanks.
And Isaac loved Esau. Esau was not a burly farm lad, one who wore a brightly colored shirt, who went barefoot and tended a herd of pigs. Esau had a long beard, a peyot, was the leader of the congregation, and even gave Torah thoughts at Shlosh Seudot. But he differed with Jacob, the righteous man of his generation, and refused to submit to his authority.
So this is the Kotzker, who gives us a radically different way of understanding Esau, which is our brother. He looked like us. Right? He had a long beard and payas, right? And he even gave Devar Torah at Shalshidus, at the final meal of Shabbat.
Talk about imagination.
Right. But on both sides, right? Just as much imagination to vilify as it is to say he's our brother. But then there ends with it. The trick here was that he just he refused to submit to his authority. And that's where you can trace with Edom and with that is it really this hatred and struggling from the womb, or is it just this, unwillingness to submit to the other's authority? And
like the Palestinians and the Israelites and Israel in a way. I mean, if you after all, they're claiming they're from.
Right. So that's where it gets incredibly complicated, of course. But I do think that there are lessons from this text study that do apply to this situation. Right here, I'm talking about Rome and Christianity. That's where the rabbis go with it. But to map it onto the current situation, I think that we've talked about that. Hirsch's mother, the mother of the hostage, said that, and this is her talking, the mother of a hostage, saying that hatred is easy and we don't have time for it. Mm-hmm. That's not to undercut the atrocity of what they are doing, and it's none of that. But what it's saying is hatred is easy and it actually is not productive. We need to bring the hostages home, and we can't get caught up in this. That's not to say we can't naturally feel what we feel in light of a barbaric attack like this. Right? No question.
If we hate, then we're like them.
Right. The question is, but how do we move forward now? And how do we, right? So I do think you can absolutely bring that lesson and apply it to the situation. But the other is, how do we see each other as adversaries from the womb? Do we focus on that, or do we remember the womb and that there is this shared kinship and the obligation to hold multiple narratives, right? It's one thing to erase another narrative in favor, to elevate our own, but we can also elevate our own while holding multiple narratives. And I do get that from this, and I would apply that to the current situation. Again, that's not to, but it is to say that if there is a path towards peace, I do believe, in context of the text that we're studying, that there is a Jewish obligation and ability to hold multiple narratives without rewriting another narrative.
I mean, the image and likeness of God
Right,
in all of us.
Right.
That,
right.
that's huge.
And by the way, it obviously goes both ways. We're seeing today the rewriting of our Jewish narrative and of our Israeli narrative, right? Saying that, when you delegitimize Israel, it's again that putting down one to elevate your own story, and it's a rewriting, right? It's saying it's colonialization. It's right, and that my point is we can't go there. We can't be rewriting each other's stories in order to elevate ours.
The past so much, and we know what the past was. Let's work on
Right.
the future.
And hold multiple
And that's what
narratives.
we're trying, and that's precisely what the Palestinians
Right.
refuse to do.
Yes, and I see, there are groups, yeah. Okay, so a lot to chew on, but I do hope it helps us with Toldot as we read about Esau and understand where this all comes from. So thank you, everybody, as always, for learning. Shabbat shalom.
Shalom.